and those of you watching by Facebook and YouTube probably you don't know this, but the opening song was the OJs, and well, Love Train. That's pretty good. Y'all knew it was OJs, right? Yeah, some of you are old school like me too. I love that. It was really good. Listen, I got to say this first because what I notice is sometimes by the time we get to announcements at the end of the service, you're kind of glazed over and you probably don't hear a thing I say, but here's the deal. The next 2 Sundays after this are going to be very, very good. We're going to have yummies and coffee around 9:30, starting around 9:30, and then at 10 o'clock we're going to start. And it's going to be kind of a seminar-type atmosphere. The 5 love languages. And I used to teach this on a regular basis. I loved teaching it so much. And one of the reasons why is because when I watch people, when I see the light come on and they go, wow, that's me, or that's you, kind of a deal going on, it's really, really awesome. And so even if you've been through the study before, the way I do it, it's so much better. You're going to love it. So be here and plan. Those of you who are out of town, plan on tuning in the next 2 Sundays at 10 o'clock. Now, today we finish up our series on Krazee Luv. And I want to begin this way. If you want to measure something accurately, it's critical to begin with the correct unit of measurement, correct? For instance, if you're building a house, you measure in square feet, not gallons, right? Oh, I've got this new house that's 47 gallons by 170 gallons. We don't do that. If you're baking a cake from scratch, you say, let's see, I need about a foot of flour. No, it's a cup, right? So proper measurement is very important. However, sometimes our standard measuring units don't always suffice. And because of that, some unusual measuring devices have come to surface over the years. I want to give you 2 or 3 of them today. One of them is called a beard second. Have you ever heard of that? A beard second. It works on the same principle as the light year for you physicists, but it was devised to measure incredibly small distances. The beard second is defined as the length of an average physicist's beard, the length it grows in 1 second, which is about 5 nanometers. You didn't know that, did you? You're going to learn some great stuff today. So they call that a beard second. Then there's the smoot. Say smoot. It's just fun to say it, isn't it? The smoot. In 1958, some MIT students measured the length of the Harvard Bridge using Oliver R. Smoot, who happened to be 5'7". And so they used him to measure the bridge, and it turned out the bridge was 364.4 smoots minus 1 ear. In fact, those markings are still there today. It's repainted twice a year, and the markings are still there on the bridge. Okay, how about if you want to measure the smell of something? Something like stinky places, right? Like bathroom or kids' room or diapers or men's shoes. Of course, that's not stinky, that's stanky, right, ladies? So how do you measure stanky? It's called hobo power. I'm not making this up. Hobo power rates stench on a scale of 0 to 100. For instance, if the odor you smell is a 50 on the hobo power scale, you would be hurling, vomiting projectile chunks. It would be that horribly nasty. They say that on the scale of 100, if you happen to smell something that's 100, you die. You just fall over and you're dead. Of course, they've never done that yet. They haven't got to that particular point. It's just theory right now. Here's the final one. This is my favorite one. How do you measure how cool someone is? You know, like the OJs were cool. How do you measure how cool someone is? The beard second doesn't work. Smoot doesn't work. Hobo power doesn't work. Watch this. You measure how cool someone is with a megafonzie. It's based on the uber cool character from Happy Days, right? TV. Some of you are old enough to remember Happy Days. For those of you who are not, that are too young, the Fonz was so cool that girls would swoon and faint every time he whipped out his comb to comb his hair. You remember? Oh, okay. Very few have rated, oh, by the way, more than one mega Fonzie. There have been a couple, Brad Pitt and a couple got one mega Fonzie, but nobody's rated more than that because, well, hey, the Fonz is the Fonz. Hey, you know, how you going to be better than that? Okay, that's enough. Here's why I was doing that. In chapters 12 through 14 in 1 Corinthians, Paul is basically answering a question nobody asked, but someone should have. The question is, how do you measure how a church is doing? How do you measure how our Christian lives, how we're doing in our Christian life? How is something like that measured? Because the church at Corinth was measuring themselves based on how many spiritual gifts they had, or how powerful their spiritual gifts were, or I've got this gift and you don't have that gift and I'm better than you kind of a thing. That was their measuring. And when they came together, even for their Lord's Supper time, those with the greatest gifts got the best seats. Everyone else got the back row. Everyone else got the back of the bus. Does that make sense? And so Paul said, this is a wrong way to measure. You're fighting over who's less gifted or more gifted. And he rebukes them in chapters 12, 13, and 14. And he basically says, you guys got it all wrong because you're using the wrong measuring device. It's not about gifts. It's not about wealth. It's not about influence. It's all about love. Show me your love, at the degree of your love, the outreach of your love, the capability of your love, and I'll tell you how you rate as a church, as an individual. Listen to these verses again. We've read them earlier, but in verse 1, beginning in verse 1 of 1 Corinthians 13. Paul said, if I could speak all the languages of earth and of angels, but did not love others, I would only be a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I had the gift of prophecy and I understood all God's secret plans and possessed all knowledge, and if I had such faith that I could move mountains but didn't love others, I would be nothing. If I gave everything I have to the poor and even sacrificed my body, I could boast about it. But if I didn't love others, I would have gained nothing. And then, as we've been doing these last 4 weeks, Paul goes on in the following verses and breaks down and defines love so that the people, us included, would get the message. So today we come to the last few characteristics, and the first one is found in verse 7. We were in verse 7 last week, but let me read the whole thing again and point this one out. In verse 7, Paul says, love always protects. Love always trusts. Love always hopes. It always perseveres. First of all, today, love hopes. I love what John Ortberg wrote about hope. He said, hope is the fuel that runs the human heart. He said, a car crash or a driving accident can paralyze a body, but the death of hope paralyzes the spirit. Hope is what prompts a young couple to stand before a preacher and promise, I do, even when they have no guarantees. And hope is what fuels that same couple many years later after broken promises and broken hearts to give it another try. Hope is why we have hospitals and universities. Hope is why there are therapists and consultants and why the Rays keep having spring training. I just threw that one in myself. When he was an old man, the master painter Henry Matisse was crippled by arthritis. Wrapping his fingers around his brush was painful. It was agony for him as he painted. Someone asked him one time, why do you keep painting in that pain? And he answered this way. He said, the pain eventually goes away, but the beauty endures forever. How many of you know that's hope? Paul says love hopes. Here's what that means. Love is forward-looking. Love is positive. Love is the eternal optimist. It's upbeat. It's positive. There's a positive outlook. Don't you love to be around people like that? Who have that forward way of thinking, and they're positive about life. They feel good about life. And don't you love to be around people who will love you that way? Someone who can see the silver lining in your dark cloud. They're not pessimists, they're optimists. By the way, the definition of a pessimist is that a pessimist always sees difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist always sees opportunity in every difficulty. You see that difference? I know there are times and seasons when being up and being positive and forward-looking is nearly impossible. I go through those from time to time, and I know you do too. Some of you stay in there longer than you want to stay. I get that. But it's like when you're called to love someone who's difficult to love. That's a season where it's really hard sometimes to be positive and forward-thinking. I remember the story. I saw this movie recently called Darkest Hour. With Winston Churchill, one of the best portrayals of Winston Churchill that I've ever seen in all the movies. I am giving it a shameless plug. You should watch the movie. But I was reminded of a story. Churchill and Lady Astor had a volatile relationship. Lady Astor was the first woman in Parliament in England. She was married to Waldorf Astor. That tells you about the family. So, but boy, she was bold and she was strong, and she would go at Churchill, and Churchill would come back and go at her, and they had all kinds of problems. One time, they were seated together at a dinner, a big private dinner. They were seated together, and right in the middle of things were kind of quiet. She leaned over to him and she says, "Winston, if I were your wife, I would give you arsenic to drink." And he looked at her and he said, "Lady Astor, if I were your husband, I would drink it." Some people are hard to love, are they not? They're difficult. And when that happens, it's hard to be up and it's hard to be positive. Let me give you some reminders here about hope. Number one, hope is a choice. You choose to be hopeful. I love sports nostalgia, and one of my favorite players was Stan Musial. Stan Musial played a long time ago, one of the great baseball players of all time, and he was known for being positive. He was known for his confidence and for being positive in everything that he did. One day, a young rookie comes into the dugout, and after the pregame warm-up stuff, and Stan Musial was sitting there, and the rookie comes up and says to him, "Stan, I feel great. My marriage is great. My finances are great. I feel like I'm going to get 3 hits today. You ever feel that way, Stan?" And Stan looked up at him with a smile on his face, and he said, "Every day, kid, every day." Hope is a choice. Sometimes it's hard to make the choice. Boy, do I get that. But it's still not impossible to make the choice. I choose, by the strength of God, to be hopeful. One of the great discoveries that I ever made is that I can choose to be optimistic. No matter how life was yesterday or how negative it seems to be today, I can still choose my attitude. I remember I had a friend one time who played basketball at that time for the Phoenix Suns. And he showed me a picture when I was with him one time of the locker room, and it was a sign that was over the locker room door that as they went out to play the game. And the sign said, "The game is scheduled. We have to play it. We might as well win it." That's a pretty good outlook, isn't it? Listen, you woke up today. You're going to live today. You might as well make a choice to live with optimism. You might as well make a choice to live it with God will. God is able, but God. Right? We can do that. Philippians 4:13 begins with the words, "I can do." I can do all things through Christ who is my strength. I can do. Say, I can do. I can do. Because of the Christ Spirit in me, I can choose to love with hope. You've got someone difficult to love, you can love them with hope, you can love them with optimism that things are going to be better the next day, and if they're not, that things are going to be better the next day, and on and on. It may be all your life you're going to pray that way, but you can make that choice. So hope is a choice. Number two, hope is contagious. Remember that adage, birds of a feather flock together. That's so true. Charles Tremendous Jones said one time, the only difference between who you are today and the person you will be in 5 years depends on the books you read and the people you associate with. A lot of truth there. And in particular, those we associate with would be the most influential probably of the two. So here's what I'm saying. Be careful who you run with. Be careful who you spend time with. Be careful who you let speak into your life. Henry Ford said this, "My best friends are the ones who bring out the best in me." Now think about that statement. My best friends are the ones who bring out the best in me. If someone fails to bring out the best in you, why would you let them be your best friend? Does that make sense? Some of you have someone who weighs you down. Every time their number comes up on your cell phone, you get a little catch in your breath. But you go ahead anyway, and you let them pour their poison right in your ear, right into your mind, and down into your heart, and you get through and you go, well, crap. And then the next day you do the same thing again and again. Why do we do that? Love that person? Yes. Casual friend? Yes. Spend all your time listening to their counsel? Absolutely not. BFFs are way more than a social media acronym. All right? Number 3, hope is a current event. Psalm 118 verse 24 says, "This is the day God has made. I will be glad and rejoice in it, in today." So what that means is, listen, this very moment is the most significant moment of your life. Right now. Who knows what your moments are going to be? Hopefully they'll be a little better. But you understand what I'm saying. Right now is the most significant moment of your life. One thing I love about my wife is she has her times too, where she's down too sometimes. But even in the midst of that, she still has hope. She has this hopeful, positive outlook. When I first began to really get to know her, she would say things like, "Best vacation ever. Best date night ever." And then later on, it was best Christmas ever. And then after we were married, best sermon ever. Best husband ever. Now, I laughed at first when I first got to know her when she would say those things. This was the best day ever. And I'm thinking, wasn't the best day ever, but I didn't say that. But I'm thinking that. I'm kind of laughing, about it. And then, the more she said it, as I was getting to know her, I thought, this poor girl's never gone anywhere. She's never done anything. And then I realized she had gone plenty of places and done many, many things, but she just knew how to fully enjoy every single moment. What a great attitude that is. How many of you know that really helps me, Mr. Sourpuss, sometimes? It does. It's choosing not only to live in the moment, but to savor the moment, to drink the moment in, to cherish it. How many of you know the older you get, you look back and there are things you wish you could relive with your children, things you could relive with parents who have gone, people that we've loved. There are all those things. And I don't mean that in a, oh, woe is me. I mean that, boy, that was good. I'd like to go back and get some of that again, right? Boy, that was sweet. I'd like to have that day over again. We savor our moments today. We cherish those moments today. Because one huge key to no regret living, to looking back at your memories with joy rather than sadness, is to give full attention to this moment, to your now. Look at someone close to you and say, I am loving my now. Say that to someone. I am loving my now. All right. Love hopes. Number 2, love endures. In verse 7 it says, love always perseveres. Originally that was a military word. It was the idea of being positioned in the midst of a violent battle, and then once you were there, standing firm and enduring the opposition. So Paul again is expressing the idea that love is never easy. And the reason why is because we have to give love to people. If it was not people, we would be okay in this, but that's why it's difficult. That's why we have to have some endurance. Loving puppies and loving kitties and loving hedgehogs, loving little piggies, that's not so hard, right? That's not that big a deal. But people, oh, sheesh, that's a whole different subject. Let's do a little experiment. I want you to pair off in twos, and if you're sitting single, you be 1 and 2. Speak to yourself, Beck. Stan. I want you to pair up in twos. Look at the other person, say, I'll be one. And then say, the other person, say, I'll be two. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say number one, say this, and you repeat after me. And then I'm going to say number two, you say this back to them, and you repeat after me. Ready? Here we go. Number ones, look at the person and say, I'm hard to love sometimes. And number twos, look at that person and say, ain't that the truth? Aren't you glad you were a number two? Think about the example of Jesus. Most everyone that Jesus hung out with, think about this. Most everyone that Jesus hung out with and loved was messed up. Now think about that. Some people that you hang out with are messed up, but some people are not so messed up, and thank God for those, right? In Jesus' case, most everybody he hung out with was messed up. His disciples, they had anger issues. They had ego issues. They questioned his decisions. They lacked faith. They turned their back on him. One was even a traitor and sold him out for 30 pieces of silver. And then there were the people that followed him around. They were the adulterers. They were the thieves, the drunkards, the poor, the lepers, the homeless. Messed up people, every one of them. Yet he loved them still. Now, how was that possible? Why was he able to do that? Because God's love was his love. And God's love that was in him always endures, never gives up, no matter what the situation is. I love this story about a man named John Decker. He lived in an English village years ago. And John Decker, by all reports, would have been called an average guy. He just was average. He lived in an average town. He did average things. He was just an average guy. Every morning he would do what most of the men in the community did. He would put on his tweed suit, get on his bicycle, and ride off to the textile mill where he worked. And then he would come home at 5 o'clock, and every single day when he came home, he would spend time in his rose garden until supper was ready. Then he would come in, have supper, and spend a quiet evening with his family. Pretty average guy, just a quiet guy, ordinary guy, living in an ordinary house, ordinary family, ordinary job, ordinary life, right? Well, when he came home from work and went to the flowers, he would take off his suit and put on his overalls and get out there and dig in the dirt because he loved these flowers and especially these roses he grew. And he had one claim to fame, and that was in the village. They had a garden show every year called the Village Garden Show, and every year he won the prize for the best rose. 5 years in a row he'd won the prize for the best rose. It meant something to him. And so people just expected that this year would be no different. He cultivated those roses. He worked on them very hard. And this year, secretly, John knew in his heart there's no way he could not win. He was going to win for sure. Because he had the rose that was the rose of all roses. It was the most beautiful rose, most beautiful flower he had ever seen. It was absolutely perfect in every way. And some people said he was able to grow those roses because he mothered them. He talked to them and they sort of understood him. He really had both green thumbs. And so he was preparing this rose for the show. And on a Friday night, he went inside the house planning to transplant that rose to a pot early the next morning and take it to the garden show to display it. Well, early that morning, they were having breakfast, and that's when tragedy happened. Bursting through the back door was John Decker's 6-year-old son, Rob. And he was screaming excitedly, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy, look what I have for you, Daddy, look what I have." And there in his grimy little dirty hand was a prized rose, petals falling off, drooping. "Here, Daddy, just for you." That day at the fair, people who were into that kind of thing couldn't wait to get over to see John Decker's rose for the year. When they got there, there was John Decker's sign, there was the pot, there was the soil, but there was no rose. Instead, there was simply a stick. And on top of the stick was a picture of his son, Rob. When the judges found out what happened, they awarded him an honorary blue ribbon. And the townspeople talked among themselves and decided that the rose that wasn't really a rose was the greatest thing he had ever grown. Love endures. Love stands in there, holds in there. What do you think that did to a 6-year-old boy named Rob? How do you think that helped him grow up and helped him in his maturation process? Love endures. I've said all along in this series, we call it Krazee Luv, and it can be crazy good, it can be crazy bad, but it can also be crazy hard when we try to do it on our own. I said that Jesus' love was God's love in him. Now God's love is in us. That's how we love. That's how we're able to endure and make it. Love hopes. Love perseveres. The last one is this. Love lasts. Verse 7 and 8 says, love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. And then look at this. Love never fails. Say that with me. Love never fails. Now look how wonderfully these last three characteristics fit together. In our relationships and our love life, we are able to endure because of the hope and optimism that God gives us. And we are able to endure and live with hope and optimism because the crazy love of God never stops loving. It never fails. It lasts. Let me give you this. I read this called 1 Corinthians 13 Revisited. It's kind of a modern remake on 1 Corinthians 13. Listen to what it says. Though I have taken 3 years of Greek and Hebrew, if I have not love, I am become just a scholarly windbag. And though I come to church every Sunday, and though I've missed only one outreach event when I had the flu, if I have not love, I'm nothing. And though I tithe every week, let me repeat that one. And though I tithe every week, where am I? Though I tithe every week and always have my quiet time, and though I send my kids to a Christian school, and though I invited the pastor and his wife out for dinner one night, if I have not love, the whole thing means nothing. Love keeps on loving when the other doesn't love back. Love doesn't get jealous when the next door neighbor can afford a new car, and love doesn't put it in the face of the next door neighbor when I can afford a new car. Love isn't rude to the persistent salesperson on the phone. Love is gracious when the line you've been standing in for an hour closes just when you reach the counter. Love's not always happy when your lazy partner at work gets laid off. Love always keeps on loving even when embarrassed by your teenager's ink, music, or friends. Love isn't thwarted by 10 hours of screaming kids, soiled diapers, dirty dishes, and a perpetual mess in the living room. Love never fails. Whether there be knowledge of Greek and Hebrew, you'll eventually forget it. Trust me. Whether there be your kids in a Christian school, they'll graduate. And now abideth faith, hope, and love, these three, but the greatest of these, genuine love, keeps on loving, simply because God did. Now, that stuff's good, but I hear, because I heard in my own voice as I was preparing this, something like this. Pastor, I like that stuff. It all sounds well and good to me, but it's still not easy. I still have that person. I still have these people. I still have that family that's just impossible to love sometimes. You don't know the relationships I'm dealing with. No, I don't. But we can thank God that He knows, correct? And if we let Him, if we trust Him for the strength to love, then He will most assuredly give it to us. Incidentally, this word fails is the word love never fails, is the word pipto. It's the idea of falling like John Decker's petals off of his rose, like a leaf or flower petals that fall to the ground and decays and withers away. Now look at verse 13. And now these three remain, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. When all the other virtues, including faith and hope, have come and gone, love will still be there because love is the pinnacle. Love is the apogee. Love is the greatest of all. We're getting close to the Easter season now. And no doubt some of what you will hear, stories that you will hear, will talk about the women who came to the tomb after Jesus was buried to prepare Him after he died to prepare his body. You remember the story of the women coming to the tomb. Let me ask you a question. Why did they come to the tomb that day? Think about it. Why did they come? Was it because of their faith? Not really, because their faith had been shattered. They believed in this man. They believed that he was the Messiah. They believed that he was going to bring a great revolution. Their faith had been shattered. Was it hope? Nope, wasn't hope. They lost that when their faith was shattered. Why'd they come? They came because of love. Faith was gone, hope was gone, love remained, because love never fails. Say that with me. Love never fails. I read a story, I'll just close with this. I read a story about a mother and her 6-year-old child, and they were in a doctor's crowded waiting room. You've been in a waiting room, haven't you, when somebody decides to get on their phone and talk excessively loud, or you've got kids there that are banging stuff around and all that kind of deal. Well, that was the story that day. It was a crowded room filled with people. Here was a mother, 6-year-old son. And he was the kind of little boy that was so inquisitive, he just asked about everything. Mama, what's that? What does that do? Mama, why is that color brown? Why is this green? And just question after question after question. Finally, everyone in the place could hear the things going on, and they were looking at this woman like, how does she do this? Yeah, this kid's driving me crazy. I can imagine 24/7 with this guy. How is this happening? But the mother was very patient. She answered the boy's questions. Everything was fine. And just about the time the people could not believe that she was doing this and were asking those questions, why, she answered their question by the way she answered her son's next question. And her son's next question was, Mama, tell me about God. And so she began to talk about God. And she talked about all the wonderful things God does and how he takes care of us and how he's with us every day and all those kind of things. And finally the little boy thought for a moment. He said, Mom, why doesn't God must be tired. Why doesn't he just get tired and stop? And the mother thought for a moment. She answered her son. She said, because, honey, God is love. And love never gets tired. Love just keeps loving. That's a pretty good definition of the whole deal. Love doesn't get tired. Your body gets tired, your emotions get tired. You want to just go, oh gosh, I can't do it anymore. But there's something inside that just tick, 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 and it's not just the beating of your heart, it's the beating of the heart of God, of his love. It never grows weary and never grows tired. And that's what gives you the strength to go on and love the people that are difficult to love, because someday what you reap, you will sow. And because as you let God love others through you, not only will it bless them to be sure, but it blesses you. Because you get, like we said last week, you get what you give away. Right? So let's pray. So God, for those who are watching today online and those in this room, I pray that you would give us a love that never, or remind us that we have a love in us that never fails. We have a love in us that never grows tired. We have your love in our hearts. And so cause us to make good choices even when our body and emotions scream to make another kind of choice. Help us this week to have the courage to rely on your strength and your love in us to make that good choice, to make that difference in someone else's life, knowing that in return differences will be made in our lives through others by you. I'm grateful for the love of God that always perseveres, always gives us hope, and never, never fails. May it be our rock and our substance today and every day until we meet again, is my prayer in Jesus' name. And we all said together, amen. All right. Those of you watching, thank you again. Every week you bless us. We're glad that you're there. Leave your comments, and then when you're finished, share this on your timeline so that your friends will have an opportunity to see what you do at 10:20 on Sunday mornings, okay? Go to our website, newdaychurchbrandon.org, and we'll see you, God willing, next week, okay? Goodbye. All right.